Well, check this out. We got a new sled in the shop. It looks like somebody left their sled in the dryer for a bit too long because it's kind of shrunk. It's a Polaris TC, one of those 3/4 scale sleds. Now, before today, I didn't know that I needed one of these, but sure enough, here we are. Now, as you can tell from the dust, this thing has been in storage for quite a while. I believe 1987 was the last time this thing was out. And there's the last time it was registered. Now, I've heard about these sleds before, you know. I actually owned one of those engines at one point. I got it in a batch of parts. I ended up getting rid of it because I had no use for it. Shouldn't have got rid of it. That's why you never sell things. And it says it was made in November of '73, so possibly a '74 model. Now, even though it's been sitting for a while, this thing is actually in surprisingly good shape. Not much rust. The track is in good shape. Rubber's nice and soft. You can tell it's been stored indoors for pretty much its whole life. Even the skis are pretty solid. They're a little bit distorted, but we can fix that. There's some quality factory paint. And the seat's got, you know, a couple spots where the seam's coming out from around the tail light back here, but other than that, it's actually fairly soft and looks to be complete. We're going to have to put some ATF or some vinyl restorer on there to try and keep it soft. No snow flap, though. The hood vent's not exactly great. I don't know if they had an engine fire in there or what, but, you know, even the ones that are there are kind of flapping in the breeze. The hinge area doesn't look, you know, the strongest. I'm actually surprised. I thought this dash here would have been fiberglass, but it's actually metal. I guess we get to see if there's any 30-year-old gas in here. Pretty much just some oil. I guess everything else evaporated away. So that's good. We'll have to get a cable on that hood. And there's the inside. That's what I was surprised about. Look how clean that belly pan is. Well, maybe that wasn't factory paint. They got a little bit of overspray there. But the old open chain is not rusted, and man, we lucked out. Well, that is some high technology for having the ski stop, you know. Limiting your travel with nothing but a bolt and a slot. Now, from what I read, these were not known to be, I guess, the most reliable or most robustly built sleds. So everything's kind of made cheaply. And, you know, for lightweight as well. Kind of neat that it actually has a legit jack shaft in it, though. Yeah, it even came with a belt, which is quite narrow. I'm not sure how that's going to work in the full-size Polaris clutch. I thought this was supposed to have some kind of quick, you know, flip-down windshield, but I'm not seeing it. This thing has a whopping 726 miles on it, which is kind of impressive, I guess, for what it is. We're going to need a couple of new switches for the kill switch and the high-low beams. Now we got a key here. Old school Polaris key. And we got a, wow, a nice 1970s, you know, leather keychain. A little bit of rope burn on the gas tank. I really don't know why that is on there. Bogey wheels are in good shape. Seems like it's got those different style plastic drivers. Hopefully those will hold up. Track looks good. Not much dry rot at all. Yeah, she's definitely been repainted. I wish these skis were more, you know, commonly available. It'd be a great drag racing ski. Nice and lightweight. So this is kind of one of those, you know, purchases where after you buy it, you end up doing more research about it and kind of find some of the cool, information and history. So I guess this was kind of back in the time period at Polaris where there was a group of people from the Textron division that were working on a new design or new concept for a sled, and I think this was one of their projects to make like a 3/4 scale snowmobile. Not quite a mini like a kitty cat, but something that would fit into the back of a station wagon. I mean, it's a neat concept, having something that, an adult can ride, but also be small enough and easy to transport in the back of a car. However, I'm not sure if the final product actually worked out like they had intended. Like, I'm not tall, and this thing doesn't really fit you very well, not to mention that the handlebars are down below your knees. I mean, sure, you can ride it, and I'm going to, but this really isn't great for trail riding. And the other thing is kind of quality. If this thing's actually intended to be a real trail sled, I mean, you look at how thin this hood is and all how thin other pieces of metal are. It's just pretty flimsy. I mean, like that bolt, in the steering column, that's not going to last under heavy use. So I guess it didn't sell very well, and you don't see them around too much anymore. I'm sure it wouldn't take long if you threw this thing out back underneath a pine tree in the weather. Pretty soon it'd be Swiss cheese and nothing much left of it. Doesn't help that most of the parts are all specific to the sled too. So the engine, the little 175, it came out of the sled, apparently needing work. Now the previous owner told me about how it had just recently been rebuilt because somebody ran it without oil in the gas. However, looking at the piston, it definitely has some wear going on the intake side. I think we can still salvage that. So the exhaust side isn't quite as bad. Really wish I would have kept that other motor. But it does roll over, so there's hope yet. And speaking of hope, we got ourselves a grab box so we can see what's inside. Got the recoil with 2 out of the 3 little pawls in there, so 66% ain't bad. And here's the carburetor. Wow. Looks like this thing's been sitting on the bottom of the ocean. Well, we'll see if we can save this. Hopefully. Well, there you go. So apparently it didn't run for much at all after it was rebuilt, before the engine quit running again. And that's where it's been ever since. Dang, it's actually got a Wiseco piston in there. That's high performance. Well, that about does it for the grab box. So, well, wow, I missed that. I didn't realize the clutch has been sitting in the dirt for 30 years. I think that might throw the balance off a little bit. Crap. I don't know where I'm going to find another clutch. Well, I just noticed that crankshaft looks like it's quite a bit smaller. I gotta say, this sled is really confusing. One minute you're looking at it and you're like, yeah, this is a mini sled for kids. And then the next you look at it and it's like, this thing's almost big enough to ride for an adult. It's so, dead in the center that it's kind of easy to see why this thing never really caught on. So fast forward a couple of weeks and nothing's been done to this thing. As you can see, projects are quickly piling up on it. And since we have no shortage of projects, I'm being forced to get this thing out of here. So we're going to actually work on the motor and try and get it running. So let the teardown begin. That's pretty rough. There's not a whole lot left to that bolt head. We had to hold up a second here. I was getting carried away. I don't even think we have to pull the flywheel. I mean, basically the bottom end, it was rebuilt, you know, within the last decade or so, and you know, the seals and stuff look new. They're supposed to be, so maybe we don't even have to tear into that. We'll just pull the top end and see what we got. Well, for false alarm, we got no spark, so I guess we're taking off the flywheel. Now, I'm not the best at electrical diagnoses. However, I think that wire should probably be attached to something. And just like that, we got spark. I mean, this counts as a rebuild, right? Yep, definitely a Wiseco in there. Cylinder wall doesn't look too bad, but we know we're going to have to clean up this piston and stuff. I mean, it had a little bit of scuffing, but that's nothing a Scotch-Brite pad can't take care of. I mean, we're definitely not putting any new parts into this thing. I mean, we'll check the clearance, but boy, seems pretty tight there. Especially consider that this is a, you know, an iron cylinder and a Wiseco piston. I mean, geez, probably got to have, you know, at least 4 thousandths of clearance in there. So we took the hone to things, and we got it cleaned up a bit. Probably got about an extra thousandths of clearance in there, so hopefully that's good enough. Well, things are falling back together now. Well, there she is, back together. Pretty much done at this point. Got to find some kind of spacers or some other bolts up here for the other 2 head bolts. They're missing, and I guess there's some kind of a top mounting on this motor. We do need a clutch. We do need to fix the recoil. Got to go through the carb, fuel system. Yeah, pretty much nothing left. Kind of a shame that this clutch is all roached out here. The internals are in really nice shape, hardly anywhere. Fixing things are so much easier when you don't care about breaking stuff. So they didn't give you an access hole to knock those pins back out for the weight, so we made our own. Well, there's a $5 Colt motor, and that clutch looks about perfect. Well, that's just lovely inside. Don't think we're salvaging that spring. I don't think we need these high engagement notch weights for the little TC. Well, alright, now we have a whole assortment of disassembled crap, and we're going to try and reassemble it in its peak form. See, this is where some good scrapyard engineering comes in. Maybe there's a good bushing in one of the clutch shivs, you know, but you can, you know, steal it, swap them around, use the best pieces from everything, and hopefully you get something that works. So we're swapping the old, you know, squared off buttons here that worked on these flat slides for the new sliding half, which, you know, is in such better condition. It's rounded, and so are the buttons on here. Now, if you look at these ones, one side's pretty new looking, and the other side's got a lot of wear on it. You got the thrust side, it's taking all the wear. So we're going to swap those buttons around when we put them on the new one here to extend the life of it. So it'll be like a brand new clutch, basically. Well, I don't even know if I should be wasting this thing, you know, on work like this. These are becoming a collector's item. Hard to find anymore. Looks like I've already caught the corrosion virus. I tell you, Scotch-Brite pads, they could save the world. Well, there we go. Looks like crap on the outside, but She's pretty solid on the inside, ready to go. I like my clutches like I like my diet, unbalanced. Nah, I'm just kidding. We're going to balance this thing. But don't get that confused. I just ate 2 donuts. So we've got out the janky old clutch balancing tool here. You can see that in another video. It works surprisingly well, actually. It's actually not bad at all. I'm amazed. I mean, it's a slightly out to one side, but definitely not the worst I've seen. Ski-Doo TRA clutches are way worse. There it is, balanced pretty good. I'll have to watch the video to see what the actual accuracy I got on this thing was, but it was definitely, you know, I think a gram or 2. And bam, there it is. I don't even know if I mentioned this while we were taking it apart. The reason we had to go through all this anguish was because the inner sheave here has a smaller taper than your standard clutch. So we couldn't just swap things over. We actually had to take all this apart, use this piece. Luckily there wasn't, you know, too much excessive corrosion on this side. Otherwise we'd have been, well, we've been grinding and balancing and using it because we're not buying a new one especially for this motor. Alright, this has been a challenge. There must have been some studs that were on these 2 bolts here that went through the cylinder head, clamped the cylinder head down, you know, with a nut, and then had a stud sticking out the back here that went through the motor mount, okay, that holds the top of the engine, because this is a laydown motor. I've been searching through my miscellaneous metric bolt pile and cannot find anything that's, you know, exactly the right size. And the other thing too, I can't. None of them are studs. All right, so now you got the issue of clamping onto the motor mount and also supplying the hold down force for the head. So the closest thing we're getting are a couple of these spacers. Now luckily I was able to get a couple of the same size that we're going to have to put onto the head here and use a bolt that's going to go through the motor mount and then down into the cylinder and just sandwich everything together at one shot. And the only 2 bolts I have that are even remotely close are different sizes, so we're going to be using a lot of washers. Now don't get excited. We're not washing this thing. We just put some vinyl protect it and restore on the seat to try and keep it soft so it doesn't crack, you know. Well, this thing's a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle, but I think we're putting it back together right. The exhaust gets kind of jammed down underneath there, and, you know, you kind of got to wedge this thing into the motor mounts. Well, hey, we solved one mystery. Figured out why those vents are always broken. When you set the hood down, it sets right on the ski tip, and it just breaks right through them. Well, I'll tell you, it doesn't really show it, but this is one of the most frustrating engine installs ever. You have to have like every bolt hole perfectly aligned and like suspend the engine in midair to get the bolts in. So we got the engine all in there, you know. We're finally able to tighten down these last 2 bolts here because these also hold the head on. And we're kind of rolling it over here, trying to see how much compression it's got. I don't know if you can see that, but it basically has 0 compression. So you know what that means. We get to take this thing out of here and take it all apart again. I can't wait. I don't know if it's the piston ring. Maybe it's on upside down. I know when I was looking at it, it had the writing installed, you know, towards the bottom, which usually I thought that's always, you know, supposed to face up, but you could tell by the wear on the ring, that's how it was installed. So we put everything back together, you know, the way it came apart. Maybe it was put together wrong, and that's why it quit running. But I guess we'll find out when we take it apart again. I mean, we actually had some powdered motivation outside, snow of course, and that's kind of what was getting me, you know, the final push here to get this thing ready tonight and take it out for a spin tomorrow. Well, I don't think that's going to happen now, so I've kind of lost all motivation. Now, the main reason why we didn't catch this before actually putting it in here was because we only had 2 of the head bolts that we could actually tighten up on the workbench. So you could feel some air leaking out from underneath, the head gasket there because you only had 2 out of 4, loosely tightened. Well, of course, that's going to give you low compression. So we couldn't find out until we actually put it in there, put all 4 head bolts on, and bam, no compression. Well, this was like deja vu. We went through the motor again, couldn't find anything obviously wrong. Flipped the ring, around, didn't seem to make a difference. Checked, I don't know if the ring's just not making consistent contact with the bore, maybe from some of the wear that, came from smearing that piston a little bit. I don't know. We don't have any other parts, so we got a little bit of compression now as we roll it over. So hopefully fire it up on some ether and, hope that those rings take a better seat. But we painted the shrouds, so that should help. Well, we got that done again. So on to this thing. And it's the first time I'm kind of worried about, corrosion rotting through my carburetor. I don't know if I even want to dip it into that carburetor solution. It might completely dissolve. Well, that figures. This carburetor's like trashed on the outside, but it's spotless clean on the inside. Well, that little O-ring is rock solid, so at least that needed changed. And we'll give it a thorough cleaning anyways. Well, we got a custom gasket on there, ready to throw that carb back on. And the fuel line was brittle enough that removal was easy. This is a good setup. You get all the belt dust coming around there to come up and right into the carb. I hope this belt hangs in there because I'm sure there's not an extra one out in the pile. It's pretty thin. I mean, that still don't look right to me. When you can measure your belt side clearance with a yardstick. So one of the last things is trying to get this recoil back together. And I'm pretty sure I have an extra one of these pawls somewhere. We just have to find it. However, being that this isn't like an essential thing to run, I'm kind of thinking we just use the rope start method and, see if it runs before we actually go through this effort. There's got to be some missing springs and other miscellaneous stuff on this too. Almost time to hit this thing with some spray and see what happens. Alright, got the stand in place. We filled up the carburetor bowl with some fuel. Didn't put it in the tank yet because we're just going to see if this thing will fire. See what happens. Keys on, kill switch is on. Choke's on. Let's see what happens. It's really great that there's a lot of sharp edges here to catch your hand on everything. I think we're going to have to put some ether in this. Alright, some ether in there. There's something. Nah, not too bad. Electric starter. Probably not going to work so well. I don't know, I think it's toying with me. Well, we tried, and we're not giving up, but we're taking a break because this thing's just got to make way for other projects. So on the shelf, it's going to sit until we tear that motor apart for like the 8th time. Well, I guess I lied. We're back at it. I'm not letting this thing beat me. And once again, we're back here checking out the rings, and I think we found the problem. The ring, as you can maybe see there, has a certain area that it's not making good contact with the cylinder wall. Now the end gap, you know, it's not great, but it's alright. But for some reason this area of the ring's got a slight gap to it. You can kind of see the gap there. So we're not going to find another ring like this very easily, especially not for a Wiseco piston. So we're going to have to very carefully try and reform this thing into a round. I'm sure this is in the shop manual here. Well, we're making progress. However, there's still a little bit of a gap there. You can kind of see when you push on it, it flexes over. Now we're going to have to bend this thing and form it pretty much so there's no discernible gap between the cylinder wall. And if we can make it that round, the gas pressure will do the rest on keeping it sealed up against there. At least that's the theory anyways. Alright, hopefully this is the last time this motor's going back together for a while. On a side note, you can still smell the ether, you know, down in the bottom end. Well, once again, here we go. Wow, that's more than we've had thus far. Maybe not. No choke. We got a fresh can this time. I'm going to try this again. New battery. Choke was on. Might be a little bit too much.